And now we finally move on to our uh, the last short story, that is Sara Paretsky's Publicity Stunts, which features W.I. Warshawski, her creation of this character of a private detective. So, who is V.I. Warshawski? Now, she seems to be the contemporary of Kinsey Millhone, created in 1982 by Sara Paretsky in her novel Indemnity Only. It is set, and I think we'll come back to this when we discuss Crime and the City. It is set in Chicago, and Chicago is an important presence in Warshawski novels. So she's deeply embedded in the political and economic structures of Chicago. Her full name is that Victoria Iphigenia, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Warshawski. She's half Jewish, half Italian, so uh, she's of course white, but not a conventional Anglo-Saxon white. She's half Jewish, half Italian, with working class roots. She was formerly a public defender. The character was formerly a public defender, now turned into a private investigator. We are going to, I hope you've all read, we are going to discuss this short story, Publicity Stunts, which was written earlier but has been republished in her collection Love and Other Crimes. So do read that story before going on with with the lecture, and of course we are going to have spoilers as we discuss the story. So, in publicity stunts, Warshawski is drawn into a media circus when she refuses to act as a bodyguard for Lisa McCarley, a right wing crime fiction novelist who fakes a threat against herself for publicity. That's what Warshawski believes. When Macaulay is later murdered, Warshawski is framed for the crime by Macaulay's political ally and former abuser, Cloud Barnett. The story explores the themes of media manipulation, gender politics, childhood sexual abuse. At the same time, it showcases VI's moral clarity and emotional restraint, and of course, her investigative skills. So, as you can see, it is a very it's embedded in very again, day to day, everyday issues. It's again, as I was earlier saying, it's not about criminals, yes, there is blackmail, but it's not about criminals, drug dealers, and so on. Even when there is drug dealing and gangs in the background, the crime happens in a very middle space between domesticity and organized violence, like organized crime, somewhere in the middle ground between that. And of course, in publicity stunts, we have more of things like media manipulation, childhood sexual, so more contemporary issues like gender politics, media manipulation, and childhood sexual abuse coming in. Now, throughout the story, we see Vi as emotionally open. She cries, loves, fiercely questions herself throughout. Whether she's right in rejecting Macaulay when she came with a threat, what happened. She's often drawn into cases with, not in this particular case, but in her other stories. We always see her within a network of friends, community members, strangers. Even here, when she goes, Macaulay throws the wine in her face, and their friends around her constantly. And she's not, although she's again a lone figure as a detective, she exists in a network of friends, community members, and there is a kind of a moral obligation, but also a kind of social. They all have a social network, social obligations, social attachment to each other. Unlike the cool detachment of hard-boiled men, so therefore, Via's emotions are an integral part. Her connections are an integral part to her pursuit of justice. Now, although we have seen it in most of the female detective figures, but here we can discuss it all together in VI, the emotional intelligence as feminist method, We have seen this in Miss Marple. We have seen this also in Kinsey Milhone's characterization, and we see her in VI's. We see that quality in VI's characterization as well. Basically, reading emotion is a strategy. VI's strength, or for that matter, female private detective strength, lies in her ability to read people beyond the words that they are saying. When Lisa Macaulay tries to frame her fear as urgent and authentic, VI can read that she likes to be the center of attention. She senses theatricality. She senses the self obsession, narcissism behind it. Despite her personal distaste, she remains attentive. She listens to Lisa. She looks at the paper. So she never mocks vulnerability, but distinguishes between fear and manipulation. She can make that out. So VI doesn't react emotionally. She thinks through emotional posturing. Especially, this is evident when Lisa comes to meet VI. She thinks through emotional posturing. So emotional intelligence becomes like critical thinking. What are people actually trying to say and do by performing certain emotions? So we can see empathy as we see in Miss Marple. She's able to empathize with Gladys Lynch, who's a killer. Milhon is again able to empathize with the old man who's a murderer. Here also we see empathy, but without compliance. Even when Macaulay is murdered, Vi becomes a scapegoat. She does not wallow in self pity. She does not give in to rage. Instead, what she does is she methodically investigates, asks questions, follows the emotional inconsistencies in the story. Her emotional control is not coldness, it is mature, ethical self regulation in the face of injustice. She's herself attacked, right? She's herself attacked by the media. She could have easily given in to rage. She could have gone to media to clarify her story. She tries to do that. But in the end, what she does is slowly, with control, with a kind of emotional intelligence, not giving into emotions, she investigates the crime. So she does not retaliate. She listens, she observes, and allows her own integrity to shape the response. So there is emotional depth. She can understand Lisa Macaulay. She can understand when she reads the novel, Lisa's latest published novel. She kind of gets the hint of the relation between Cloud Barnett and Lisa Macaulay. She can understand what's happening, what could have happened. So there is an understanding of that emotional depth, but there is no sentimentality. The story takes dark emotional turn when it is revealed that Macaulay was sexually abused as a child by Claude Barnett, that she was beaten up when she tried to speak up about it by the mother, that she was not believed. So it gives a tragic depth to Macaulay. VI acknowledges the pain behind Macaulay's actions without excusing them. Just like we saw in Milhon, she can acknowledge the helplessness of the old man. She can empathize with it, but she cannot excuse it. So this complexity, the ability to hold grief and criticism in the same hand, that is what defines VI's emotional intelligence. When her, you know, that is what kind of sets her apart from other women, like, Gertrude, the woman who kind of uh, who learned when her there were two girls in the past who tried to expose Claude Barnett, then Carl Bader, for the sexual abuse that he was perpetrating on the children going to the church. So the while Macaulay's mother does not believe the other girl's mother, sorry, the other girl's mother, Gertrude, she believes, but she reacts emotionally, right? She reacts emotionally, whereas Vi, even when she learns the whole story, she connects the dots, arrives at the whole case, goes to the police, right? So there is grief, there is understanding, but at the same time there is a detachment. That is where her strength lies. So we see the narrative voice again. It is narrative voice is that of a first person female authority figure in action. There is, as in the case of Kinsey, there is dry humor, observations, but there is also moral clarity. Her voice is neither romanticized nor objectified. It's a voice of woman with a lot of professional experience, political conscience, and emotional nuance. I mean, political conscience is there throughout. We see one of the reasons that she's targeted Warshawski is that, she believes in women, and she believes in feminism, and she believes in women's interpersonal relationships and sisterhood, but the which clearly Lisa McCauley does not, and Claude Bernard has taken it as a task to uh, cry out about, whine about it, and that's the word that Warshawski uses. He has learned to complain about it. He's made a media career out of complaining against or kind of deriding, dismissing feminism, right? So we clearly see the ideological battleground that her stories are in this particular story. So, publicity stunt in a way shows emotional intelligence in feminist crime fiction is not about sentimentality or softness. It is about resisting manipulation. She resists manipulation, whether it is Warshawski's, or sorry, whether it is Lisa Macaulay's or it is Claude Bernard's media manipulation, right? She resists it all. She upholds people. She holds people accountable while understanding their pain. She goes to Louise Macaulay, Lisa's mother, who kind of beat her daughter when she tried to talk about the sexual abuse that she was facing in the church. So she holds her accountable, but she also kind of, understands their pain. She understands Lisa's pain when she reads the book, however much they disagree. She chooses, her motivation is not revenge. If you read the story carefully, her motivation is justice. Her motivation is solving the crime, finding out what happened, and in the process she investigates or interrogates systems like media, celebrity, gender, that shape the story, that shape visibility. I mean, Lisa is of course highly visible as a, she's a pretty upcoming celebrity writer, right? And the violence that is there in her writing and the violence that she has faced in the past as a child. So to conclude, then, VI narrates her own stories like Kinsey, but with a more openly emotional, political. I think that is where she's different from Kinsey. She's openly political and often polemical tone, argumentative tone. Her voice is critical of structural injustice, right? Structure. So she's not just critiquing uh, the crime is not about one person. It happens in domestic space, but it is about institutions like the church, media, right? So she's talking structural injustice. She's talking about structural injustice and not just about individual wrongdoing. So if you see, I have drawn this table. Please pause here and just have a look at this table. I've kind of put in a comparison of Miss Marple, Kinsey, and VI, and we see the progression of, or the development or the evolution of of the figure of female detective in crime fiction. We can see the changes in the genre, in their methods, in their positioning, the tone of the narrative, the way violence is portrayed or represented, and of course, I think the common trait of emotional intelligence that female detectives bring in, and then the gender politics that their presence brings into the genre. So, to conclude, the female detective in crime fiction, we see them observing from the margins and they use that position to see what others overlook. They often interrogate emotional and domestic spaces. That's where the crime is set. And so, not just public, spectacular crime, but everyday abuse, everyday crime finds way in crime to the crime into the crime fiction. They often deal with crimes of carelessness, betrayal, power, not just motive and opportunity. Their authority is rooted in listening, pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, ethical response rather than action or dominance of force. Each one of these detective figures reflects the historical moment, right, the era, and offers a different feminist lens on crime and justice. Basically, they reflect the particular time periods, understanding of women, the role of women, and how that, in a way, offers a feminist lens, as I say, on crime and justice. So, if we compare male detectives like Holmes, like Marlowe, uh, who assert control over chaos, right? Who bring in order. Female detectives often expose chaos that is built into the system, right? That marriage is an unequal. Miss Marple, in Miss Marple's case, that marriage is built on certain rules, and women who transgress have to be punished, are often punished. So even if she's holding up the system for investigation. Same we see in VI story, whether it is church, media, the whole institution of of celebrity authorship and so on. So these are the spaces that are uh, we see the spaces of chaos within the system, systemic chaos, systemic violence. Holmes and Marlowe operate in a world where justice is personal. Marple, Milhon, and Wachowski show that justice is often partial, justice is gendered, right? Remember, Miss Marple, the first in Tuesday Night Club, everyone thinks that it is all the women are suspects, right? So justice is gendered, it is partial, it is elusive. Even when the criminal is arrested, punished, the justice is not often not served in that straight manner. Female detectives use emotional intelligence, emotional literacy, memory, care, right? Emotional labor and ethical judgment, and not just brute force or detached logic or rationality. So, couple of things to reflect over in your assignment, your podcast, or the magazine. Think about, what does it mean to solve a crime? What does it mean to serve justice when the systems enabling harm, like gender, class, power, remain untouched, which we see in all these stories that we have discussed? How does detectives' gender shape what they see, say, or do in the search of justice? This is something that you can explore in your in your assignment. And can emotional insight and care be forms of investigative power? Right? Emotional literacy as an investigative tool, which is built on violence and control. How does this emotional intelligence work as an investigative tool in the world of violence and control? And with that, we come to an end of this week's lecture. See you next week.